There comes a moment when the avoidance silence stops protecting them, when the walls they built to keep the world out start closing in on them instead, when the numbness they once wore like armor becomes a cage. They thought they were choosing peace by shutting out the noise of closeness. But now the quiet is too loud to bear. And for the first time, they're not running from you. They're running from the emptiness inside. The avoidant never sets out to destroy connection. They don't wake up one morning deciding to become cold, or distant, or detached. It happens slowly, so slowly they hardly notice. 1,000 small moments of overwhelm, each one teaching them the same lesson. It's safer not to feel. So they shut down. They pull back. They learn to breathe through silence instead of touch. At first, it works. The quiet feels safe, predictable, under control. But what they don't realize is, every time they protect themselves from pain, they also protect themselves from love. And this is where their quiet collapse begins. Because the same walls that once kept them safe start keeping them lonely. The same numbness that dulled their pain starts dulling their joy. You might look at them and think they're fine, calm, composed, unbothered. But that's the cruel illusion of avoidance. They look in control, when inside, they're starving. They crave closeness more than they can admit. But the moment it's offered, their body remembers what closeness once cost them. To be seen once meant to be judged. To need once meant to be shamed. To depend once meant to be disappointed. So when someone tries to love them deeply, it doesn't feel safe. It feels dangerous. Their nervous system lights up like an alarm. Every tender gesture feels invasive. Every warm word feels like pressure. You see love, they feel threat, and their instinct is to retreat, to disappear behind that old emotional armor, the one they've worn so long it feels like skin. They tell themselves they're fine, that solitude is peace, that independence is strength. But there's a subtle shift happening inside them, a quiet tremor beneath all that control, because numbness has limits. You can only push down your needs for so long before they start pushing back. It begins with restlessness, the nights that feel too long, the conversations that don't land, the laughter that doesn't reach their chest anymore. Then, without warning, the things that once gave them comfort, the distractions, the control, the detachment, stop working. They still go through the motions, still smile at the right moments, still act unbothered. But when the numbness starts to crack, the emptiness floods in. That's the quiet collapse. Not a breakdown you can see, but one you can feel. It's the emptiness they can't explain, the loneliness that follows them. Even when they're surrounded by people, they start to question everything. Why can't I feel? Why does nothing touch me anymore? But the truth is, they've spent years training themselves not to feel. They've silenced their emotions for so long that now even joy feels foreign. They used to think shutting down was strength. Now it feels like suffocation. And that's when the longing begins to return. A longing they don't understand. A pull towards something real. A memory of warmth they once pushed away. But reconnecting with feeling isn't as easy as just deciding to open up. Because when the avoidance starts to thaw, the first thing they feel isn't love, it's pain. All the emotions they've buried start to surface at once. Grief, shame, fear, regret. It's overwhelming, like standing in front of a fire after years in the cold. And so they back away again, not because they don't want love, but because they can't bear the flood of feeling that comes with it. You might see them withdraw, right when you thought they were softening. You might take it personally, but it's not you. It's the part of them that still believes. Safety means silence. And yet, deep down, they know something is shifting. They can feel the cost of their avoidance now, the ache of being unseen, even by themselves, because every time they pretend not to care, they lose a piece of their truth. Every time they pull away, they leave behind the version of themselves that just wanted to be loved. That's what the quiet collapse really is. Not an explosion, but an implosion, a soul folding in on itself, because it can't bear to stay numb anymore. They start to see it in small ways. The songs that suddenly sting, the memories that rise uninvited, the eyes they can't meet for too long. The body always remembers what the mind tries to forget. And when the numbness stops working, the body starts to speak louder, in restlessness, in anxiety, in that haunting sense that something is missing. Even when life looks fine, they'll tell themselves it's nothing. They'll distract. They'll stay busy. But the truth keeps knocking, softly at first, then harder, because you can't stay numb forever. Even the avoidance armor eventually cracks. And what comes through the cracks isn't weakness, it's life, trying to find its way back in. When the avoidant begins to feel again, it doesn't come as peace, it comes as chaos. They start to notice everything they once ignored: the sound of someone's voice, the tone of concern, the way love feels when it lingers too long. It's both beautiful and unbearable, because deep down, they've always wanted to be seen. But being seen also means being known. And to be known means there's no more hiding, no more pretending they're okay. That's the terrifying part. Their identity has been built on control, on being the one who doesn't need, who doesn't break, who doesn't chase. So when emotions finally surface, they feel like an invasion, a betrayal of everything they've told themselves. You might see it as progress. They might feel it as panic. Because for the avoidant, softness isn't safety. It's exposure. It's the child inside them saying, if I let you close, you'll leave me. They want connection, but their nervous system is wired for distance. They crave tenderness, but their body confuses it with danger. And so begins the tug of war between the part of them that wants to love and the part that's terrified to be loved. They'll lean in and then retreat. They'll open up, then shut down harder. It's not because they're playing games. It's because vulnerability feels like losing control. And for someone who's survived by staying guarded, losing control feels like dying. So they test you without meaning to. They'll say something distant, just to see if you'll stay. They'll act like they don't care, just to see if you still do. It's the only way they know how to feel safe, to make sure love won't disappear if they stop performing for it. But what they don't see is that very test becomes the reason love disappears, because no one can hold on forever to someone who won't let themselves be held. And when you finally start to pull away, when you stop trying to fix them, that's when the quiet collapse deepens. Because now, they've lost the distraction of being pursued. Now, they're left alone, with everything they try to bury. They start remembering the moments they brushed off too easily, the messages they ignored, the eyes they avoided. They start hearing the echoes of every "I'm fine" they said when they were breaking inside. And that's when numbness turns into grief, because they realize it wasn't the world that abandoned them. It was them who abandoned themselves. They left their emotions behind, their needs, their tenderness. And now the cost of avoidance starts to feel real. The nights are heavier, the silence sharper. Even their independence feels hollow. They used to think being alone was power. Now it feels like punishment. They wonder, how did I end up here? How did I become someone afraid of love? And slowly, the truth begins to surface. They didn't choose detachment. They learned it from years of being shamed for feeling, from caretakers who couldn't hold emotion, from moments when softness was met with silence. It wasn't avoidance at first, it was survival. But now survival has turned into isolation, and the very thing that kept them safe has become the thing that keeps them stuck. That realization doesn't come all at once. It comes in fragments, in flashes of memory and sensation. A conversation they replay, a gesture that suddenly stings, a moment when someone's love feels more like a mirror than comfort, because now they can see themselves, not the strong, unbothered version they show the world, but the scared, tired version who just wanted peace. And this awareness is both a breaking and a beginning, because the moment they realize their numbness is no longer protecting them, it starts to dissolve. It's slow, uneven, messy. They might cry without knowing why. They might feel angry for no reason. They might miss people they pushed away, long after it's too late to reach out. But that's what healing looks like for the avoidant. It's not soft music and self-care routines. It's the raw ache of remembering what it's like to feel again. It's the disorienting weight of emotions returning to a body that's forgotten how to hold them. And through it all, they start realizing something profound. That numbness was never strength. It was fear, dressed as control. And underneath that fear was always longing, longing to be understood, without having to earn it, longing to be held, without having to hide. They start to see love differently now, not as a threat, but as something that can survive truth. They begin to understand that connection isn't about perfection, it's about presence. That maybe love isn't what hurts, it's the absence of it that does. And slowly, painfully, they start to wonder if it's possible to come back to life. When the avoidance starts to face their own collapse, it doesn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happens quietly, in the spaces where no one is watching. They'll be doing something ordinary, washing dishes, scrolling through their phone, folding clothes that no one will see them wear. And suddenly, it hits. The wave they've been holding back, the weight of everything they've avoided. It sneaks in through the smallest cracks. A song lyric, a smell, a memory they thought they'd buried for good. And in that moment, they realize something terrifying, that the numbness they once relied on isn't working anymore. It used to protect them. Now it just keeps them lonely. They feel emotions rise, like a tide they can't stop. Grief, regret, tenderness, shame, each one carrying a voice, whispering the truth they never wanted to hear. You cared more than you admitted. You wanted more than you allowed. You pushed away the very thing you longed for. For years, they thought shutting down meant strength. They thought needing no one made them safe. But safety without connection isn't peace, it's emptiness. And now, that emptiness echoes louder than ever. They start to see their patterns, how they turn cold when someone reaches out, how they disappear when love feels too close, how they say I'm fine when they're anything but. It's like watching a film of their own life, scene by scene, seeing for the first time how much they've missed. They remember the look in your eyes when you tried to reach them, the patience in your voice when you said, "It's okay, you don't have to hide," and how they froze anyway, not because they didn't care, but because caring felt like danger. They never meant to hurt you. They just didn't know how to stay. You gave them warmth, and they mistook it for pressure. You gave them consistency, and they called it control, because in their mind, love was always something that demanded, never something that simply was. And that's when the real collapse begins. Not the breakdown others can see, but the quiet one that happens inside. When they realize that the very walls they built for protection have become their prison, they start to question everything. What does safety even mean? If it costs you closeness, what is independence? If it leaves you disconnected, they look at their life, all the people they've kept at arm's length, all the relationships that ended before they could deepen, all the moments they chose pride over peace. And it hits them. They weren't avoiding people. They were avoiding pain. But pain isn't the enemy. It's the map back to themselves. Still, they fight it. They'll distract themselves with work, with achievements, with anything that feels like progress. But the quiet moments catch up. The stillness, the nights when no one texts, the mornings when they wake up and realize the silence isn't soothing. It's suffocating. That's when the body begins to ache in ways that aren't physical, because stored emotions always find a way to surface. Maybe it shows up as fatigue, maybe restlessness, maybe an unexplained sadness that lingers like fog. It's the cost of years spent running from what needed to be felt. And slowly, they begin to understand that healing won't come from trying harder. It will come from feeling deeper. They'll resist it at first, because feeling feels unsafe. They'll tell themselves, I'm fine, I've moved on. But deep down, they know the pain they never processed is still running the show. So they start to sit with it. Not all at once, just a little, a few seconds longer each time. They'll let the emotion rise, then breathe through it. Instead of shutting it down, they'll learn that crying doesn't make them weak. It makes them real. And for the first time in a long time, they start to notice moments of softness, a sense of calm. That doesn't come from control, but from surrender. They begin to talk to themselves differently. Instead of, what's wrong with me? It becomes, what happened to me? And that shift, that small, quiet shift, changes everything. Because now, they're no longer fighting themselves. They're listening. They start to understand why they pushed love away, why intimacy felt unsafe, why detachment felt powerful. It wasn't because they didn't want love. It's because love once hurt, and the body remembers pain long after the mind forgets. But when they finally allow themselves to feel that pain, instead of running from it, something sacred happens. The numbness begins to melt. The world starts to color again. Food tastes richer. Music feels deeper. Moments last longer. They start to care again. And though that scares them, it also frees them. Because caring means they're alive. And aliveness is what their avoidance took away. They'll still stumble. They'll still shut down sometimes. But now they notice it. Now they understand the pattern. Instead of being trapped in it, and little by little, they begin to choose differently. They'll send the message they once deleted. They'll hold eye contact a moment longer. They'll stay, even when it feels easier to run. And that's how the quiet collapse turns into quiet growth. It's not dramatic. It's not a movie scene. It's just a human being learning to come home to themselves. They've spent so long hiding from themselves that when they finally start to open, it feels like learning to breathe again. At first, it's shaky, uneven, almost unnatural. They're not used to this kind of honesty, not with others, and not with themselves. But something inside them knows that the only way forward is through. They can't keep pretending they're fine. They can't keep loving halfway. They can't keep using detachment as a disguise for control. So, they begin again. Gently, cautiously, they start to practice staying. Not running when it feels uncomfortable. Not shutting down when emotion rises. They start to listen. Instead of defending, to respond. Instead of retreat. And the smallest moments become the bravest ones. Because for the avoidant, being seen feels like standing unarmed. It's not the world they fear. It's exposure. Exposure of all the parts they learn to hide. The parts that were once called too much. The parts that were never comforted. The parts that believed love was something to survive, not receive. But now, they start to see that hiding is no longer working, because hiding also hides the good, the connection, the warmth, the realness, and what once felt like protection now feels like suffocation. So, they start to take small risks, letting someone in just a little, sharing something real, even when their instinct screams, don't. And every time they stay, every time they allow closeness, something begins to shift. The body still trembles, but it no longer collapses. The heart still races, but it doesn't shut down. They realize feeling isn't the enemy. Feeling is the bridge back to life. They start to notice that the world doesn't fall apart when they're vulnerable, that someone can hear their truth and not leave, that love can sit beside fear and not disappear. And that's when they begin to understand the difference between safety and control. Control says, I'll only be loved if I stay perfect. Safety says, I can be loved even when I'm not. It's a truth they've never known. That love doesn't require disappearing, because their whole life, they equated love with losing themselves. So they chose distance instead of depth. But now they see, it was never love that erased them. It was fear, fear of being found, before they were ready to be known, fear of being seen, before they understood their own worth. And now that they're finally meeting themselves, they're learning to let love meet them too. They start remembering what connection is supposed to feel like. It's not chaos. It's not chasing. It's not punishment for caring. It's quiet, steady, warm. It's being able to exhale in someone's presence, to be messy and still be chosen. And that kind of love is foreign to them. At first, they mistake it for boredom because it doesn't trigger panic. It doesn't make them prove their worth. But then they realize peace feels foreign only when you've lived in survival. So they start to rewire what safe means. They start to see that the calm they used to run from wasn't emptiness, it was healing. They begin to let go of the chase and lean into the stillness. And in that stillness, they rediscover something sacred, the ability to feel without needing to escape it, the ability to sit with love without trying to control it. They begin to understand that intimacy isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about showing up as they are, even when it's uncomfortable. They used to think love was a performance. Now they see it's a practice, a daily choice to stay open, even when the past tempts them to close. And slowly, they begin to trust again, not just others, but themselves. They trust that they can survive closeness, that they can handle the waves of emotion without drowning in them. They trust that softness isn't the same as weakness. And in that trust, something tender begins to grow. Compassion. Compassion for who they were, for the version of themselves who thought avoidance was safety. They stop shaming that part. They start understanding it. They realize that part was never broken. It was just scared. And now, instead of running from that fear, they start to hold it. They begin to see their patterns, not as flaws, but as clues. Clues pointing to where the pain began. Clues showing them how to return to themselves. And maybe, for the first time, they start to feel a quiet pride because they're doing the hardest thing. Feeling. They're walking toward what they used to avoid. They're opening doors they once slammed shut. And every small moment of honesty, every tear they don't swallow, every truth they finally admit, becomes part of their healing. They begin to live less from fear and more from truth, less from protection, more from connection. And the more they practice it, the more they realize healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who they were before they had to hide. There comes a point where distance stops working, where silence no longer protects, where the numbness they built their world around starts to crack, and beneath it, something soft begins to stir, something that's been waiting for years to finally be felt. It doesn't roar, it doesn't demand, it just whispers, "I'm still here." That voice, the one they buried, under independence, under logic, under all the ways they tried to not need. It's their truth. It's the part of them that always knew there was more than survival. But survival became their identity. They made it a home, a religion, a shield, because needing nothing felt safer than risking everything. They told themselves they didn't care, that love was overrated, that they were better off alone. But deep down, they wanted what everyone wants: to be met, to be held, to be understood, without having to hide. And now, the truth stands in front of them. They can't get there by being untouchable. They can't find peace in control. They can't find freedom in avoidance, because avoidance was never peace. It was protection from the pain of not feeling safe to be loved. But safety now isn't about walls. It's about presence. It's about being able to stay when everything in them wants to run. It's about learning that they can be loved and still be free. That closeness doesn't mean losing themselves. That vulnerability doesn't mean collapse. That letting someone in doesn't mean disappearing. The truth is, they were never afraid of love. They were afraid of being powerless in it. So, they used distance to stay in control, because if they could control their feelings, they could control the risk. And if they could control the risk, they could control the pain. But love isn't something you control. It's something you meet, something you move through, something you allow. And that's where the quiet collapse happens, when they finally realize that detachment doesn't protect them anymore. It isolates them. It starves them. It turns life into something flat. Because you can't selectively numb pain without numbing joy. You can't hide from heartbreak without hiding from love. And you can't protect your heart by closing it, only by healing it. So now, they stand at a crossroads. One path feels familiar, the path of control, the path of silence, the path of being fine. The other? It's messy, unpredictable, raw, but it's alive. And for the first time, they choose life. They choose to let themselves feel. They choose to let someone in. They choose to stay, even when it hurts, because they finally understand. Pain that's felt heals. Pain that's buried haunts. And the haunting is what's been breaking them all along. It wasn't love that destroyed them. It was resistance. Resistance to softness. Resistance to trust. Resistance to being known. But once they stop resisting, something beautiful happens. They begin to thaw. And as they do, they start to notice the world differently. The colors are brighter. The air feels warmer. Even the silence feels softer. Because when you stop numbing, you start living. And they realize this is what they've been missing. Not perfection, not certainty, but connection. That invisible thread that ties you to something bigger than your fear. It's the look in someone's eyes when they really see you. It's the moment someone stays when you expected them to leave. It's that quiet realization that you don't have to hide anymore. They begin to let love move freely, without needing to control it, without needing to earn it, without fearing its loss. They stop viewing love as something they can lose and start seeing it as something they can live. And slowly, peace begins to settle in. Not the peace that comes from isolation, but the kind that comes from finally belonging to yourself. Because healing doesn't mean they'll never want to pull away again. It means they'll notice it sooner. Pause. Breathe. Stay. It means they'll meet their fear with understanding, not punishment. And in that moment, they realize the opposite of avoidance isn't dependency, it's intimacy. It's being fully there for themselves and for someone else. It's saying, I don't have to run anymore. I can be loved without hiding. And in that truth, the walls finally fall, not with noise, but with a quiet kind of grace. Because the avoidance real collapse isn't destruction, it's awakening. It's the moment numbness stops working and life begins again. And if you've ever loved someone like this, or if you were someone like this, maybe that's what healing really is. Not becoming fearless, but choosing to stay soft, even when you're scared, choosing to feel, even when it hurts, choosing to love, without needing to hide behind control. And if you've made it this far, maybe that choice has already begun. So take a breath. You don't have to earn closeness. You don't have to perform for peace. You just have to stay present. That's where healing lives. And if this spoke to you, if it helped you see yourself or someone you love more clearly, let it remind you softness is not weakness. It's where real strength begins.